Okay, so in this last demo video, I'm just going to show you some of the steps that I took to get from this point to this point. I'm not going to redo the whole thing, obviously, but I want to just show you a couple of little tricks that I did to make it easier on myself. I'm going to move my layers palette over here so I can actually see what I'm doing. Um, I'm going to actually go ahead and get rid of this swatches layer because I'm really not using that anymore. I've created some swatches in my swatches palette that I think are a lot more accurate, and so you really don't want to have any layers that you're not using. But what I'm going to need to do is I've already got that base layer of the skin midtones, and what I want to do next is I want to create the second layer of midtones, which are just a little bit darker and a little bit more defined. I need to lock this layer so that I can't accidentally do anything to it, but I'm going to turn it off so that I don't have to look at it. And I want to turn my photograph back on so I can use it as a guide. And I'm going to create a new layer over the top of Skin Midtones 01, and I'm going to name it Skin Midtones 02. Okay. And I'm going to sample out this color. I imported the colors in my swatches library from this file over to this one. And if you want to know how to do that, look at chapter 6 in your reference guide. I think that's part of your assigned reading for next week, or this week actually. And you need to kind of familiarize yourself with how to manipulate all your palettes and everything. But I'm going to use my eyedropper tool and sample out my second midtone. Okay, so now that's my foreground color. Get my pen tool, and I'm just going to go around like I did before, and I'm just going to trace out some of these larger shapes. Okay. And the nice thing about doing this is that anything that happens underneath my contour line or underneath the hair, I don't really need to worry about how precise I am because it's going to not show anyhow. Isn't that nice to know? Okay, I want to make sure each path is closed. And of course, knowing that I can always come back in and, fix this up later. Okay, so I think you get the idea. So I would, like say every so often I would go ahead and, turn off, turn off the photograph, turn back on the original color layers and just see how I'm doing. And then keep proceeding, after I've done all my midtones. I think the next thing on my list was the shadows on my skin. Make another layer for that. And let's see, the color that I chose for that would be this one. Okay, so and then just start drawing in those darker areas. Be careful with the shadow areas. These can be really harsh if you overdo them. I think I'd mentioned that a couple times already. And just because of my complexion being kind of pale, I had to be extra, extra careful because if I was too dark on the shadows, they just looked really, really bad on mine. You know, so I didn't necessarily do the best job there, but I think you get the idea. Okay, so, you know, after each step, go ahead and check myself. So, you know, create a new layer for the skin highlights, of course. Really sorry to be, at least I'm not there with you face to face where I can make you sick, right? Okay. But then the same, just keep going the same thing. I think this was the color that I had chosen for my skin highlights. Right here. Make everything else invisible. And see my, and then of course your highlight areas are kind of what we think of as hot spots. And you kind of want to be sparing with these as well. Okay, these are just, you know, these are usually going to be very light. What happened? I didn't get my color in the way I wanted it, did I? Something went wrong. I need to try to sample out that highlight again. What's going on, people? There we go. Okay. And so, you know, the shadows and the highlights need to be kind of sparing. It's the midtones that are going to take up the big areas, and the shadows and highlights are really just going to be for spots. You know, like you can see right here, there's this spot of light on my shoulder. Okay, you want to be kind of reserved with these. These are the areas that, you know, you don't, and if you go overboard with them, I put way too many of these in on my first pass, and they looked horrible, and I wound up taking most of them out. But you know, I think I spent more time on this tweaking than I did actually putting it together, and I have a feeling it'll be the same for you. You've got to get something in there. Okay. Let me show you what I did for the eyes, and I'm actually going to zoom in on this one so you can see it. Okay, and I recommend zooming in pretty tight. And let's make all these other layers invisible so we can see what's going on. When you're doing anything small, you do need to get in pretty tight. Okay, so if you notice, you know, when we're dealing with an eye, well, it's so pixelated right there. But you know, essentially, an eye is a pupil, which of course can be done with the contour line. There's usually a dark rim around the edge, and if a person's eyes are light enough, there might be kind of a radial linear pattern coming outward from the pupil that might have a little bit more color in it, and then there's usually a little bit of a highlight. And in the demo video, they do show a way of making it shiny. I did not take the time to do that on mine. Feel free to do that if you want to, but I'd actually have to go back and look at that. I can't remember how they did it. But anyhow, what I did then was, whoops. Okay. I just went ahead and did this all on one layer. Let me unlock this so you can see individually. Okay. So I've got the little zigzag thingy. I've got a, let me just move this out of the way. I've got a circle that I stroked, and I have a gray circle, okay? And since I'm feeling really lazy today because I'm sick, I'm just going to cheat because I think I'm entitled to do that. And you guys don't want this video to be very long anyway. Okay, so what I'm going to do, remember that the eyeball has to be underneath the skin, right? So I'm going to create a new layer sandwiched between the photograph and the midtones. And I'm going to just call this eyes. Okay. And I'm actually going to be, oh no, what did I do? I think I just crashed my program. I did. Okay, well, I'm going to sign back in a minute.